You are listening to Aspect Ratioed, a film and video game podcast, Episode 3. Today's topic of discussion, Shin Godzilla.
All right, hello everybody. We are your hosts, Spooky Deer and...
The Rodgers Academy.
Oh, I thought you were going to keep reading. And this is Aspect Ratioed. We are back with...
We are keeping that in, everybody.
No.
And this is Aspect Ratioed, and we are back with another episode. And today we are talking about everyone's favorite kaiju, Godzilla. More specifically...
Gojira!
Yes, no, Godzilla. We go with the American name.
The Western. Hey, I'm walking here.
But more specifically, we are going to be talking about the 2016 Japanese reboot, remake, spiritual successor, sequel film, Shin Godzilla.
Beautiful. I'm excited. This is such a weird deep cut for us, and I am looking forward.
What you gotta start with Puss in Boots, and then you gotta go to Dark Souls, and then
you hook them in.
You go. Hey, now we're going Godzilla, but not just like the Godzilla that people like mostly know, or like the most recent Godzilla. No. We're going to the 2016 Japanese one.
Right. No Matthew Broderick here. Like we're all in.
Hey. That Matthew Broderick film is
better than.
I really wanted to make a joke about be jokingly asshole about it. Be like, it's actually not that bad. It is pretty bad.
It's pretty bad, but it did spawn a pretty decent animated series.
Yeah.
The animated series is pretty good, and the Game Boy Color game was also very good. See, a film and video game podcast.
Let's go. We did it. We're done. Okay. Thanks everyone.
We squared that circle. Pack it up. Let's go home.
Okay. But as always, before we get talking about the main meat and bones, the main topic, the main whatevers, we got to do some little housekeeping. So, how you been, Spooky?
I've been good, homie. How have you been, Rodgers?
I'm good. No,
never mind.
I'm good.
Quick, play some music over that, and we'll just talk about how great everything's going for me instead.
Yeah. Do.
It's like technical difficulties. We're fine. No, I would say, I mean, things have been going good. The weather's looking nice out there. Plants are growing. I have touched some grass.
You touched grass?
I've touched grass? I know. And I didn't even die. It wasn't even the Mark Wahlberg kind of grass. So we're doing fine. And speaking of grass is becoming legal in more states. So that's pretty badass as well.
It is indeed. So people can have some grass. I mean,
you can touch grass with your lungs. You can touch grass with your lungs whenever you want. It's amazing. But no, what have I been up to? I've acquired a piece of artwork. I finally went and picked it up. I think I talked about this, I think probably on the last episode, where I'd gotten this little watercolor portrait of Bill Murray as his character Herman in Wes Anderson's Rushmore. I bought that I don't know, probably 8 weeks ago, and I just have not gotten back to the gallery to pick it up. So I finally picked it up, and I'm very, very excited. It's a nice little portrait. I love Rushmore. I love Wes Anderson. So that's been cool. And as always, just, cracking away on stream and video editing stuff. I recorded 2 videos yesterday. It was very, very efficient. And you'll be happy to know this, Rodgers. I even made eye contact with the camera, and I think that I avoided looking at my notes and looking all shifty and weird this time.
I'm so proud of you.
Who would have thought that I could have grown that much from one video to the next? So,
I know, right? Well, the thing is, too, for a little bit of context, is it's not a bad thing for someone to be looking at their notes, read, because you're still just providing the content. It's more just if someone is very actively watching the video and not just listening, they're going to be like, oh, I can see the eyes go down, eyes go up, eyes go down, eyes go up.
It's usually at the end of my sentences too. It's like you just see my entire posture goes bloop, and as I go back to my notes, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing next? So
yeah. It's not a bad thing. And if some YouTube comment comes through, it says, oh, you can't even fucking say a line without having to read it.
I'd like to see you try, bitch. Yeah, it's cut me some slack. We're doing our best. But it is something that I think that I I obviously haven't gone back and put the full video together. I'm still sure there's going to be some of that shit, but it felt like I was more dialed in, which is cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And streams have been going good for you?
Streams have been going good. Yeah, I know that you're maybe a wee bit salty that I took a week off from working my way through Resident Evil 4 because I'm pretty sure that's somewhere on the docket for this podcast. But
yeah.
But
Some
but
point.
I knew it. It's just it makes sense. But I got a pretty cool opportunity from a developer of a new game that came out, and I was so into the game that I didn't give a shit if anyone else was or not, and yeah, did a full
It
week
is kind of
of
cool.
streaming that.
It is kind of cool that you're just like, fuck it. I'm playing this game because I like this game, and no one can stop me.
Nope, and people still showed up. So,
and honestly, I think the only person who probably could have stopped you was either yourself or me. If I went in and was like, "Hey, I really don't think this went over well. Like, I think you should really reconsider." But obviously, I never do that. I just always give my input whenever I feel like it's necessary, but it's never to that degree.
Well, not yet. I haven't given you a reason yet, anyway.
Yeah, so. True. Yeah, but for me, I mean, I'm just in the middle of a lot of work and life stuff, and trying to juggle it all. So I'm happy to be doing. I'm always happy to record this with you, and I know it's such an early stage of everything, but it is fun just getting to meet and shoot the shit about all this stuff. It's nice. It gives me reminiscent back in our days when we used to work together.
Right. It's this is how we would get through, every shift, basically.
Yes.
It's just ignoring, well, for all the few customers that we had, ignoring them and talking about what we cared about instead.
Yeah. But the most recent thing on my docket is I just recently watched all the Evil Dead movies for the first time.
Oh, hell yeah. Because there's a new one out, right?
Yes, there is. So I've seen all the Evil Dead movies. I saw the new one. I enjoyed all of them. Obviously, I'm not going to go into that because that becomes a whole. This is not the Evil Dead episode.
This is the Godzilla episode.
So, and then I picked up Akira Kurosawa's Ran. Or Ron. I don't know how it's actually pronounced.
I think. Yeah.
I think it's Ron. But it could be Ran, and I just feel
we're doing
I'm
our
trying
best.
To be fancy. Yes,
we're doing our best.
It's because I was at Best Buy and they had a steelbook for it for $20. It was a 4K steelbook, and it would look really pretty. And I'd actually never heard of the movie, but I just saw Akira Kurosawa. Yeah, I'm picking that up. Fuck it.
Yeah, $20.
Yeah. It looks really gorgeous, and it's a 2 hour and 40-minute war epic from 1985. So.
Fuck yeah! This is Kurosawa, at his top of his game. Yeah, they would just let him do whatever the fuck he wanted at that point.
Yeah, so I will definitely get to watching that at some point in the next 12 months.
That's a fair timeline to set for yourself, because that I am itching to do a Kurosawa episode, but I have some homework to do on my side as well before we can do that. So.
Yeah, I think we both have homework, and we both have because I think it's the problem with TV shows and franchises is you have to do the question of, do you do an episode per entry or do you do a long episode?
Right. You try to be cumulative with the entirety. And do you go shallower over one episode, or do you hit it deep on multiple? And
Godzilla's we were talking about maybe even watching the 1954 original before watching this, and talking about both, but time and scheduling kind of goes well, we should probably just watch this and then talk about it.
Right. If only I could have searched through Twitter to find my live tweets from 2014 when I watched 6 of the original Godzilla movies back to back, borderline blackout drunk. We started with the 1954 Godzilla film, so I was still pretty sober at that point. I think we could have gotten a pretty decent recap just from those, but
that movie has some interesting moments of comment, moments that hit very deep and of commentary about the political world and the world that had happened in the past 10 years. There's some pretty poignant stuff there, but it's really one of the more interesting things is how much it was censored when it was brought over to the Western audience, because it was toned down to be a dumb monster movie and for Western audiences.
They completely carved out like all of like what makes it good and like why Godzilla has resonated for so long. And I think that's something that kind of surprised me about Shin Godzilla, which I know we're not at the point where we're going to be talking about that
Well,
yet.
and
But
it did remind me. So it sounds like we're starting to talk about Godzilla a bit. So let's ask each other our questions, and then we'll get rolling into Shin Godzilla. So we have a question of the day. I come up with a prompt. Spooky will answer. I will also give my answer, and then Spooky will give me a question. I will answer. He will also answer. So, my question I had for Spooky was, what is your favorite or least favorite monster kaiju movie that you've ever seen throughout your years of existing?
oh wow, it's like when I saw this in our outline for the day, I was like, damn, there's so many directions that I could go with this because, like, in fairness, Godzilla films slap, but also some of them objectively do not slap. Again,
Yes.
I will reiterate back to my 9-hour live tweeting marathon when it was still cool to live tweet. We watched some shitty Godzilla movies at that point. I don't even being drunk did not help. I was like, what is happening here? But I don't want to talk about what I didn't like. I want to talk about what I do like. And I gotta say, I am a big old Pacific Rim fan.
I knew you were going to talk about Pacific Rim.
I fucking love Pacific Rim.
I knew that was the movie that was going to be brought up because it's your boy Guillermo.
I love Guillermo.
Yep.
It's like, I haven't even seen Pacific Rim 2 because he was less involved in it, and I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it.
Don't watch it. It's not a good movie. It unfortunately is just a big waste of time. But Pacific Rim, the original, slaps so damn hard.
It bangs. Like there's just so many interesting concepts, and it hits all of the right notes that you want out of a kaiju movie. Like it's got this sort of like mysterious background world building, and like they've got all this like weird shit going on, and they're like, yes, the only solution. Clearly the only solution is to mind meld twins or best friends together to drive a robot together in sync. Yeah, sure, okay.
But it's also like it just embraces it, so it never like stops to apologize or make a joke or like be like, oh, we're not taking it. Just
it's
runs
so
with it.
earnest. It's so earnest, and you're just like, and it to me, it totally sells me on the concept. I'm like, you think about it for like 5 minutes, you're like, this is batshit insane, and then you go, but it's cool because it's like it's an anime. Like it really like Pacific Rim is an anime through and through.
Well, and it's definitely like we want to put our Rock'em Sock'em Transformer robots versus big kaiju monsters, and it works so well. It's so fun.
It's so fun. And I love the lore behind all of the Jaegers. Like there's just like the few remaining Jaegers that are out there. I'm like, this is so like I'm all about it. I'm all about it.
It's a great time, and it's thinking about now, it's like 9 years old, I think. It's visually pretty stunning.
It's aged very nicely because they did some stuff for real, which I love. I'm a sucker for blending your visual effects with like practical because it just kind of helps ground it a lot more. And Pacific Rim. So what's yours then, Rodgers?
Well, I also went with a Western choice. Mine is more of a monster movie, not a kaiju movie. It is 2008's Matt Reeves's Cloverfield.
See, okay. I was kind of wondering where you were going to go with it. Cloverfield is so cool. I feel like it didn't get enough credit when it came out. I feel like a lot of people dunked on Cloverfield is like what I remember.
I think there's two things with Cloverfield. One thing is it had probably one of the best marketing campaigns for a movie.
Absolutely.
Because it did it all under secrecy. People did, for a good amount of its time being marketed, it didn't have a name. And then it finally got named Cloverfield like very close before release. But it was still, it never like told you what it was. It was just something had hit New York City, and there wasn't like there was just a lot of mystery around it. And then it was a found footage movie. And I think it was in that era where Paranormal Activity had just gotten really popular.
Yeah, there were a lot of found footage things happening around that time.
And I know there's Blair Witch as well, which I'm not trying to be like, oh, Blair Witch didn't exist. I'm just saying Paranormal Activity really brought back like we can do the found footage thing and just market it because anyone will go see it.
Right.
And I think that movie is actually just very effective because following just, a group of essentially friends who are all just like partying to, wish their friend goodbye because he's going to like move out to Japan or something. And, just big monster attacks the city. But there's a lot of it is just really well, like, there's so much background that happens in that movie where it's like there's a lot of times where there's not action, but there's just so much happening where you're like not seeing it is more like intimidating because you're just wondering what the fuck is happening rather than like knowing what's happening. I also saw that when I was 10 years old, and
oh damn, scarred.
It definitely scared me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, because it was a big old monster just fucking shit up.
Right. I think what's so cool about like the found footage thing and why I think Cloverfield itself is so effective with it is it's like I like being put into the shoes of like an actual just like normal person. Yeah. And oftentimes like, if you write a whole screenplay and you make a whole movie, it's like the person is your protagonist, they're your hero, and they need to kind of like continue to exist to tell the story. And I think found footage kind of can help ground that a little bit more, and you can be just as bewildered as the characters. There's not as much like blunt exposition explaining things.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And it also really helps to do stuff on a budget too. Like I think one of the, because I think Cloverfield holds up really well because they're shooting it on like shitty, like personal pan pizza human camcorders, like whatever you could buy in 2008, they're filming it with, and then all that grain and jank that comes from that helps it sell. You can sell the effects so much better without it having to be super high resolution, and it makes them be choosier about when you do see the monster itself. So good pick.
And well, the thing too is like I'm not going to go too much farther onto this because then I'll just start talking about Cloverfield for way too long. But I think I say this every podcast recording where it's just I don't want to talk about it because then we're just going to talk about it way too long.
Right.
Lord of the Rings. Gotta bring it up again.
Da, 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 da.
But no, I think the thing that works so well for me with that movie too is just like there's an interesting lore with a lot of its marketing that the creature is actually just a baby and it's essentially separated from its parents. And so it's not a monster in the way of just like I'm monster and want to destroy things. It's essentially just imagine a giant baby that's just kind of in big like fight or flight self-defense mode. Scared. So it makes it so much more like interesting that there's like essentially just a rampant giant child just like destroying things because it's scared. And there's actually like a lot of like questions of like, oh, throughout the film, are you seeing the same monster or are you seeing the parents at one point? Like there's kind of like some questions there. So there's a lot of interesting lore. And unfortunately that series kind of like Technical Villain I like a lot, but it got quickly into like the anthology thing where it kind of was it kind of got too franchised too quickly, but it's still an interesting concept.
Right, but it kind of diverted from what initially brought it in as well. Yeah. Monster movies.
Good time. So it does roll into your question though.
It does.
Monster movies.
Because and I guess my question is, why do you think that monster movies have been so, I guess, consistently popular? And monster movies have been around since film became a medium. So what gives monster movies staying power in your mind? And I think we're probably just going to agree on this one. This is more just like a general discussion point, if anything.
Yeah, I think there's the film historian aspect of me is like, I think monsters is like making the unreal real. It's the like something that doesn't exist in our world is now like present on the screen. So it's really interesting. So like King Kong, big ape, big monkey, destroying things. A lot of that's done with, stop motion and everything. But for a lot of people watching it back in the day, that was like a huge movie because it was like, oh my God, this is awesome, or this is scary, or whatever.
Yeah, it's like this is so impossible, and it's made it possible. Yeah.
So I think the reason why it stays around is because I think kids really like seeing monsters just get beat up. So I think there's a childlike thing that's just nice to see, just monsters duking it out, or just monsters destroying a bunch of stuff. And I think now with where we are with technology, we can see monsters just like do things in such like high definition that it's just so cool that there's the level of like it being really cool or it just being really dumb, but it just hits that like level of like just pure joy of watching. However, you can still have monster movies be actually effective pieces of art as well. They're not just like cool and dumb. Like you can make intriguing pieces of art with the aspect of using a monster, because you can typically use that monster to represent something in history, or as a represent a group of people or whatever. Like you can do it in so many ways. It's not just locked down to cool dumb monster mash,
big destroy the city type of thing. And I think that's where I kind of see the lasting power of it is, one, it makes the unknowable or the unreal real, but I think it also is almost like a simplified storytelling mechanic. As we're going to be talking about Shin Godzilla, I mean, there's a lot more that goes into the background, and I think kind of distilling elements of criticism or trauma or all of those types of things and kind of pouring it into this monster makes it easier subject matter to tackle, and you can kind of lead the audience in a way of understanding without necessarily needing to know exactly what you are talking about, And I think that's just, it's so useful because, I know like a lot of like the sci-fi B movies that were coming out of the US in like the 50s and 60s, like so many were all about kind of like thinly veiled anti-communist propaganda. You have the Blob and all these like unknown other things coming from outside of the US and wreaking havoc. And I think it really just plays into the paranoia of the era. And I think some were, pro anti-communism, and others were kind of being like, y'all are stupid. Like, think about like what you're really, how you're reacting to things here. So
yeah. I completely agree, and I think that's the interesting thing is like monster movies are pretty effective on like all planes of the medium. There isn't like it isn't just like, oh, everyone just kind of unifies together and goes, we like the monster hit thing, this is fun. Like it is fun, but like it's there are so many aspects that monster movies can be applied to, and I think that's why they hang on and stick around. Like it's not like, oh, we just had the 60s and 70s be this era of monster films, and then no one made monster movies for 30 years, and then it kind of resurged. It's like, no, they've been around. Like, you can find monster movies pretty frequently anywhere.
Right. It's like we'll keep doing them, low budget, high budget. Yep. Doesn't matter. Sometimes we just like to see like a gross little guy, Yeah. Sometimes it's just that simple.
Little guy.
Just get your your Cronenbergs out there, and it's all good. Just really like damp, weird, gross things. It's just kind of fun.
Yeah. All right. I think it's time.
Shin Godzilla was released on July 29th, 2016 in Japan. Then it made its way to the United States domestic debut on October 11th, 2016. This is the 31st Godzilla movie released in 69-year-old series. Nice.
Yeah. Nice. When I typed that out, I was like, damn.
How about that?
Damn. 69 years. Godzilla is 69 years old. How about that?
He looks great. He looks great.
He does. And I would smash. I mean, what?
Hear me out. Let him cook.
He smashes, so why can't I? So, little like context and history of my personal time with the big kaiju boy, the king of the monsters,
the OG,
the big radioactive lizard. I grew up with like everything Godzilla. My dad and my siblings, we all watched like every Godzilla movie growing up. So I've seen every single Godzilla movie. Do I remember all of them? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
But I have seen all of them, and I like every time there was a new one, got the DVD, because a lot of them were like the Toho release, so they never like released really in theaters. It was just like they eventually came to DVD for us. Would buy the DVD, we'd watch it at home. So huge Godzilla fan base for my family. So my dad, probably biggest Godzilla's #1 fan, has like all these collectibles. Anytime there's anything new Godzilla, essentially watch it with him, go to the theater, whatever. That's just how it's been for my entire life. So this character, this pop culture icon, is a huge part of my life. Whether it's constantly in like front of me is kind of changed in my like day to day now, but like it is something that like it is very much associated with my childhood. So it does have a big like impact to me. And I've always loved Godzilla, even when it's bad. Like it's kind of like pizza. There's no bad pizza.
Right. It all has redeeming. It's still pizza, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah. There's something you can find to enjoy. And so this movie actually was one of the ones I hadn't seen, because my dad went to go see it with my brother in theaters when it came out, like in the October of 2016. It was like a limited release, and I wasn't able to go see it. And then until about 7 months ago, that was because I watched it 7 months ago for the first time. So it was the one Godzilla movie I had not watched for a while. And part of the reason why is because my dad, for some reason, doesn't like this movie.
What?
He likes everything Godzilla. He doesn't hate this movie, because it's kind of like the whole applying the pizza rule.
Right.
He still enjoys the movie and has things to enjoy about it, but he does not really like this movie. And so he always sold that to me. Like he was just like, yeah, it's
not that
apart.
good. Yeah.
And he actually had shown me essentially the end of the movie one time, because I didn't care that much. I was like, sure, you can show me, like, if you're, adamant about this, I don't need to be like, no, I need to watch down and watch the movie. So I let him show me the end, and that was like a few years ago. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of, hokey, whatever. And I, just mentally was like, sure, that's the opinion. I get it. I trust you. And then one day I saw a clip from the movie, and we'll get into this scene later, but it's the atomic breath scene I had watched on YouTube, or like showed up in my feed somewhere, and I was like, holy shit.
This is fucking insane. Yeah.
This is horrifying and amazing and depressing and all this stuff. And I'm like, I gotta watch this movie at some point. So I bought a copy like in 2020, still didn't watch it. And so last year, like in the like August time frame, I finally was like, one night, it was literally like a random thing for me too. At like 2 a.m., I'm like, fuck it, I'm watching Shin Godzilla right
It's
now.
Godzilla time, baby.
So that was when I was just like, all right, I'm watching Shin Godzilla, and then I was like, holy fuck, this movie's amazing. And I wrote like a really long letterbox review, and I'm just like, and then I texted my dad the next day, and I'm like, Dad, I have something to tell you. And he's like, what? I'm like, Shin Godzilla might be the best Godzilla movie. And he's like, you are fucking with me. And I'm like, no, I like, so I've had debates with my dad now, because I'm like, no, you don't understand, Dad.
It's not a phase, Dad. Shin Godzilla's good.
Yeah, so that's my history with Godzilla, and that's my history with how I got to like got around to watching this movie. So if you want to give a little bit of your backstory
For sure.
with it.
Mine is so much less wholesome than yours. We've alluded to some of my like primary Godzilla experience, but I'd say I think a lot of my introduction to Godzilla as a franchise was kind of born out of just like random sick days throughout like elementary and middle school. You know, it's like Price is Right is over. There's nothing else on. You start flipping through channels. And I feel like it was either on like TNT or some other just like back rooms, like cable channel would just be like playing maybe on like the Sci-Fi channel when they still played good shit. Like just back to back to back Godzilla movies, not in any particular order. You know, you'd be watching one from the 50s in black and white, and then the next one would be from like the era in the 80s where it was all really like corny and
yeah, there is a channel that I know exists right now that's called like Comet TV or something. Comet, like COMET.
Oh, sure.
TV. And it shows like a bunch of older movies, and a lot of the times it's like older Japanese movies, and Godzilla movies are like one of the things that always like shows a lot. So I feel like it's one of those channels, because I know there are channels like a lot of the time where you could just tune in and just have essentially older movies that would just always play. So they'd have like Godzilla marathons.
Like a couple times a week. Yeah. And so I think a lot of my time was spent, you know, watching those and not having any fucking clue what was going on, because I was usually running a fever. And then the video game Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee came out in like 2002.
That game slaps.
The game slaps. My homies had it on their GameCube, and we would play it all the time. And I think that's what really started to introduce me to like the concepts of the different Godzilla characters and how they interrelate to each other. Because honestly, it's like that game is just like kind of like a big dumb beat 'em up, but it also did a really good job, especially for the time, of like rendering the monsters and also kind of giving background on them. And yeah, the game's fun as hell. I should get a copy of it.
I know we have a copy, but I should actually get my own copy so I don't have to like, you know,
steal it from your dad.
Hey, can I get the copy of Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, please? No, I don't mean to interrupt your history lesson, but like, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, and then there was the Xbox game Godzilla Saves the Earth. Those two came out pretty close to each other, and they were both really solid beat 'em up fighting games. And I played that so much with my siblings and my dad. And the thing is my dad was always like, Godzilla 90s is the best, and I was like, no, Godzilla 2000 is the best. So it'd always be like play, and then, you know, the announcer always like did the intro and was like, Godzilla 90s, Godzilla 2000, and it would do like the monster would have the entrance and do the scream and everything. And it's like, as a kid, that was like the best like form of serotonin, and like just like it's like just like, this is a video game. I love it. And just like picking up buildings and throwing them at your friends is so good. It's so good. We need another Godzilla video game, like a really good,
like a good
Godzilla
one. Yeah. It's like, go back to the classics, right? Like, but no. So that was definitely a big part of like what has always kept Godzilla in the back of my brain. And then fast forward to, God, was that the summer before my senior year of college? Just not having anything to do on a Friday night. It was just me and one of my roommates. We were like, God, got nothing to do. No one else has got anything going on. I'm in college, so I just want to get drunk. And then we're like scrolling through Netflix back when Netflix was good and actually had like movies that they didn't make for an obscene amount of money. And they had, I think, probably like how many Godzilla movies did we say that there were? 31. They probably had like at least 20 of them on there. And we were just like, all right, I know what we're doing. And I just kept a really, really solid, like near browning out drunk going. And I averaged 2 tweets a minute for like 7 hours.
Jesus.
just watching Godzilla movies back to back. And if I can go back and search through, I know that other people who were seeing those tweets picked up and started watching and tweeting the same Godzilla movies with me at the same time. They're like, wait, which one are you on? I'm like, I'm on Godzilla versus Mothra. They're like, all right, cool. I'm firing it up. Back when the internet was cool.
You dork.
It was awesome. It's still like, man, like when like live tweeting stuff was like still cool. That was awesome. I was like at the peak.
I think it's also just fun because like 2014 was the year before you met me. So like you met me. It's like you could just be like, yeah, last year I just got really drunk, binged a bunch of Godzilla, and tweeted it out.
Yeah, it's like go back and see what I had to think. Like, but yeah, man. So that's my history with the Godzilla franchise. And now, of course, I don't even know how I think I also probably saw a clip of the atomic breath sequence from this movie at some point, and I was like, holy shit, that's wild. But I had no idea what Godzilla film it was from, or that we would be having a film and video game podcast where we could talk about it and that I'd have access to watch it. So
yeah,
hell yeah.
I torrented it to you. No, I did not do anything illegal. You watched it
legally.
Not illegal.
It was a purchased copy.
Yeah. Next time it'll be illegal though.
Yes. Depending on who made the film, maybe. But let's actually talk about Shin Godzilla because
Sorry.
We're not gonna pirate any movies, but I have a lot of feelings about this, and it kind of hits right from the start with. When you watched this the first time, did you feel really claustrophobic when you were watching it? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you understand like the feeling that I'm talking about?
So there is something that Shin Godzilla does that I was lucky enough to be kind of prepped for how this movie starts and how this movie kind of is paced. Is so you have a lot of essentially council meetings, political council meetings of like, oh, how we're gathering to talk about like such and such happening, and we need to like process like, whoa, what's our plans to deforest this tree or like plant new gardens or whatever. It's just like
right.
But they jump from meeting to meeting. But the thing is that they do this all very rapidly. So there is a lot of text because we're watching this in Japanese, so we have subtitles. Yeah. So there's a lot of.
I missed a lot of character names during all that.
So there's a lot of text, but then there's text at the top of the screen telling you the meeting room they're in, or who like the ranking officer or official who's like talking at that start. And so there's a lot of stuff happening. Personally, for me, I just went with I understand there's information at the top that's probably semi-important, but I want to get the dialogue, so I was like, I'm focusing on the dialogue more.
Yep.
However, I watched a anime called The Tatami Galaxy, and that show is, I think they're 17-minute episodes, but I think they have about like 1 million lines of dialogue because it speaks so damn fast. Like the subtitles move so rapidly that if you take your eyes off the screen, you will miss a whole monologue. So I had that. I watched that last summer, so I was kind of semi-prepped
primed from it. Yeah,
how fast it was moving, but it is really claustrophobic in the way that there's so much information being thrown at you, and you keep moving to room that you're just kind of like. Like I can't like what
right.
Like, what am I
doing? It's also how it's filmed too, because there's a lot of just like fixed camera angle shots, and I feel like they were trying to put the camera inside of the actor's face the entire time, because there's like there's all this discussion and all these people in all these meeting rooms trying to figure stuff out, but you're always like 4 inches from one person's face. You have like no peripheral vision to anything else that's going on. The subtitles are just going pop, 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 pop. And you're like, oh, this is the, minister of, do we give everyone a spare tire for their car? And all that stuff is happening. And I just remember, for me, it was just like, it was a combination with how it was shot and just like how bureaucratic it all was.
Yes.
Yeah. You have a meeting to have a meeting, which feels a lot like, I think, a lot of people's jobs in general.
Well, and so that's one of the big things about this movie is the uh, director, Ano. I can't remember how to say his first name, but he did Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is a pretty popular anime at this point because it's from the late 90s. And he has a lot of interesting kind of critiques about how the Japanese political system has responded to a lot of things. Mainly, the big thing is that the 2011 nuclear reactor, the tsunami that happened that caused the reactor,
the Fukushima meltdown. Yeah.
Yes. That is what this movie is using as essentially its basis for Godzilla. Godzilla is a representation of that, and it's a big commentary about how like the government just responded to that. And it's a lot of it is, there's a lot of comedy in this where it's how many times they essentially say the same information meeting to meeting, but they have to have a meeting to set up a meeting to set up a meeting to set up a meeting, or like, oh, we need to commence fire. You get order, hey, can we commence fire? 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 And then, hey, Prime Minister, can we commence fire? And the Prime Minister's like, we can commence fire. And it's like,
and then it telephones back. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much like, it is like, it's funny in the aspect that you're like watching. It's like, why is it taking this much like steps? Like, this is ridiculous that it's taking this much steps to get this like important, like need to respond critical now information. But it's also that commentary of like, that's how that government works and how a lot of government works. And it shows that it's really ineffective in critical time. And one of the things is there's a kind of a bit of comedy at the beginning where they're like, oh, this can't be a creature because, it's probably just something like some fault line or some like gas line that blew up. And they're kind of all trying to dismiss it. And they're like, no, we have reports that it's a creature. And then they're like, oh no, stop talking this crazy talk. And then it's like, they get visual footage.
The TV turns on, yeah,
with the tail like swimming out of the water. Well, I guess it's a creature, and then it starts getting up, and they're like, "Oh, it can't stand on legs because it'll be crushed by its own weight." And then it's standing on its legs, running like by itself, and it's like they keep getting fact checked in real time.
Yeah, as they're like trying to like spin it and like try to keep people calm, but they actually don't know what they're not informed enough to know. Like it's too slow of a ship to turn when something unprecedented is happening. And I feel like, this was made in 2016, but I feel like there's some maybe more modern allegories that you could spin into it as well. So,
and I think that's why it was so effective for me when I watched it last year. I was like, holy shit, this movie.
Yeah, I mean, you're watching it in like 2020, like peak pandemic.
But I think one of the big things is like, there's this comedy and horror where they're essentially like, hey, the creature will not make landfall. The creature's not going to make land. It's only going to stay in water. Like, people will be safe. And the prime minister goes out to do a public service announcement saying, hey, this is what the info we have. The creature will not make landfall. And then someone comes out during his press conference and says, hey, the creature made landfall. And then you see the creature come out and you're like, oh shit. And this is where like, the horror really sets in, is because they're spending all this time trying to figure out how to respond while people are just being like crushed and killed,
literally and destroyed by this thing. Yeah.
And it's just like there's no response, and so you have this civilian aspect of people just being just wiped out while like the government is just kind of like, how do we respond to this?
And they are just clueless. I mean, for me, it's interesting because it's like I understood and I was taking on all this critique, and I honestly feel like I learned a lot about how the Japanese government works based on, I mean, obviously it's a biased take on it, but like I'm like, I get how their bureaucracy and their hierarchy functions, and like I, working in a semi large bureaucracy, I also understand the meeting to have a meeting, playing telephone to just do something that you know is exactly what needs to be done, but you need three people's permission before you can. So
Yep.
I felt that very rawly when I was watching this.
Yeah.
But I think some interesting things for me, and I want to dive into one thing. So I'm just putting this on the table just so you kind of understand what I'm talking about. And then I want to talk about something else. But as a Western viewer and audience member going into this film, I felt like many, many times I was left sort of surprised at how things resolved or how things ended up shaking out, viewing it as from the context of an American. And I think one of the early things was, it's like, I mean, I understood that this was to be like a critique of the Japanese government and their response to like a very real disaster that occurred. But I feel like, at least to me, some of that critique was undercut because I still feel like it was handled better than it would have been if this was happening in America. Like, there were multiple scenarios in Shin Godzilla where they're like, oh no, the creature is on the move again. We need to evacuate 2.3 million people out of Kyoto. And I'm just like, well, it's fucking over. All those people are dead. And then they're like, it's like 3 scenes later, they're like, Mr. Prime Minister, I am pleased to report that we have evacuated all 2.3 million people out of Kyoto. And I was just like, no fucking way. They're like, so, we are now free to shoot Godzilla with tanks and artillery because there is no one left in the city.
So I'm not trying to punch down your statement, but it is a little hyperbolic of what you just said, because with also just rewatching the movie just recently, they're essentially said the district that they're in was able to get evacuated, like the closest district to Godzilla. So they weren't necessarily saying like all 2.3 million people or like all these like millions of people have been evacuated. They're just saying this region, we know there's not like there's at least not a massive civilian population. There might still be civilians, but I'm not trying to be like yes, it is still a little bit like wow, that's really effective for how quick this situation develops. But I'm just saying there is a little bit of there is still it's more like the immediate area, not necessarily the entire massive city
region. Sure. But it's I get, and I'm willing to accept that I probably missed some of this with trying to remember people's names and catch the subtitles, because there's no way I was going to watch the dub. But
thank you.
Yes, no, I am a person of culture. So, but I still think that I think my point still stands, right?
Yes,
that
it does.
They were still far more effective at addressing the scenario with all of their inefficiencies and everything else going on. And maybe this is just the director giving some credit where it was due, but I'm just like, holy shit, you'd have all these people on one American freeway and that would be directly in Godzilla's path. It would just be mass casualty event time after time.
This brings up an interesting point with the director of this movie, though, is that there's actually another cut of this film that is more studio driven, that is more like oversight of not making things be as critiqued and a little more neutral overall.
Sure.
That was actually the version of the movie that was supposed to premiere in Japan for the red carpet premiere, whatever it was. And Anno on the night went in and swapped the film to be his version of the film. That's the version we've seen.
What an absolute legend.
Because that apparently kind of that stuff I have not done the full reading diving into, so I don't I'm totally fine if I'm completely off the mark here. But apparently he kind of had a lot of that studio interference with Neon Genesis. And so I think there was a history of being shortcomed on his projects that he was like, nope, I'm not letting this happen here.
Just has his own reel under his jacket and just brings it up into the booth. Awesome.
But I love it because it's the fact that essentially you could look at it as the Japanese government went and said, hey, this movie talks shit about us. Please don't. So And he's like, no, fuck you. We have to show this because this is what the movie is. This is what my work is.
This is the whole point of it. And it's kind of funny, like maybe to his point, he was able to get away with doing that because they're too slow to respond to anything, right?
Yeah, they were, they were going through 5 different people before getting to the actual film projector.
Like, is he allowed to do that? Is he allowed to do that?
And I don't know if it was as like
dramatic as that, yeah.
Dramatic as someone oh, the movie's about to start, let me swap film reels real quick. But I just like the idea of like, oh no, we're gonna show this cut, and it's like, sure, yeah, we're gonna show this cut. Hey, person that is running the theater, you're showing this movie, and hands the like director's cut of it.
Yeah, that's incredible.
But it is, I think what's really interesting with this movie is that it has such critiques about the Japanese government while still actually providing a message of hope by the end.
Right.
Like, it isn't so like, oh, government's all bad and, everything is shitty and the whole world is just doomed. There is like an aspect of like, if people come together, they can overcome anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the positive message that you would like to see in a movie like this from time to time. So it's nice that it wasn't all just like depressing by the end of it. Like there was actually some like message of hope.
Although I have to say that the message of hope is directly provided because the entire existing sitting Japanese government gets fucking obliterated by Godzilla.
That's the main scene of this movie I want to like dive into.
Yeah.
So to get some like kind of quick up context here. So Godzilla shows up as this kind of gross like fish beast.
Literally the yuckiest he's ever looked. Like Attack on Titan Godzilla.
And then
fleshy and weird.
Keeps evolving throughout the first like third of the movie into more of the Godzilla that we know. And his design in this movie is very like nuclear waste, kind of like gross sludge looking. He's not like more like, he doesn't look as much like lizardy. He looks more like a radioactive monster, which I really like.
Me too.
And
he almost looks like magma, like kind of like lava rock cooling over like the hotter pieces of it.
I also love that he doesn't have like any eyelids for most of the movie, so he just always is this like just stare happening, and it's really uncomfortable.
The fish Godzilla, like when that first reveal happened and he like flopped out of the river, I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
And I feel like there's probably some Godzilla purists who get like some semi like, this isn't Godzilla, because they're like, it's like, just let it be a new take. Like I'm happy when they like try new things with it. So it's cool to see like Godzilla quote unquote like evolve throughout the movie. So essentially Godzilla evolves and he gets to his main Godzilla form, and the government tries to do this big bombing run on him. He's pretty much immune to everything because his just shell is like insanely strong and they can't like get anything on him. So he's just essentially stomping his way to Tokyo, just like, I can just go to Tokyo because nothing can stop me. And
literally unbothered. Like I feel like he doesn't even register that they're shooting at him. Like he's not directly aggressive towards any of the tanks or anything. Like he's just like whatever.
Well, essentially he hasn't been hurt at all yet at this point in the movie, and he is essentially just, I mean, in all with what this movie's going for, he is just a walking natural disaster happening. And what's really interesting is, so we get to this nighttime scene where Tokyo's having to evacuate / hide underground in their underground like evacuation tunnels / just bunkers, and they're trying to evacuate like the prime minister and like the top government officials. And the U.S. is there to help with like a bombing run, and they're dropping these like huge missiles. And
I think they were dropping they were like JDAMs, which I'm pretty sure are like the bunker penetrating. Like they bury themselves like a mile underground when they get dropped.
And it's a really cool shot because the missile drops and it hits Godzilla, and it fucking like, this is the first thing we see that actually hurt Godzilla, because it just like rams right into it and just blood spews out and everything.
Yeah.
And it's a really like visually stunning sequence, but the music that starts to play, which is this American choir, like late like female voice, just singing these lyrics that are what the director said is essentially the lyrics of what Godzilla is at that moment, like the feeling of what Godzilla is. So it's like the song from Godzilla's perspective, and this just haunting, quiet, like choir, like just music kind of plays, and Godzilla activates his atomic breath, which starts as like this big fireball, and then it turns into the laser beam that he's most known for now. And it is just a wrecking machine. It's not like in previous, I feel like in the recent legendary picture Godzilla movies, it's like there's kind of like, it is a big blast of energy, but it feels like it's always been like, oh yeah, but it just hits and impacts and like kind of crushes things. This is like a fine point laser that just slices through any material
and goes forever.
Yeah. And Godzilla just wreaks havoc to all of Tokyo, just slicing through like this portion of Tokyo, slicing through everything, blows up the helicopter with the prime minister on it. So that top government officials all dead. And then the bombers that are dropping through does the coolest new Godzilla thing and just shoots all of the lasers from its back up into the air and just blows all that. It's just like, holy shit. And I think the thing for me why that sequence works so well is because it's never played as epic. It's played very somberly. It's just sad.
It reminded me a lot of like when you see footage of like actual like nuclear weapon tests. It was very, very reminiscent of that to me, of things just kind of getting blown away, just raw destruction. It was spectacle, but also it wasn't like, I mean, okay, it was very cool, but it also like wasn't cool, you know, if that makes any sense.
It's cool in like the artist way where you're like, oh, this is like, this sequence is very well done and it looks really good with the lighting and like everything put together looks fantastic, especially because there clearly is like a budget with Godzilla, because he definitely is like a very CGI creature in this. However, like this scene is clearly where they put all the money
got poured into this sequence, and fortunately so, because it really works. Like you realize just how devastatingly powerful and kind of like, not reckless isn't the right word, but just like, it's just wanton destruction, you know? It's like you made him mad, but I still am not convinced that he actually thinks at all.
It's just the response.
It's pure instinct. Yeah.
It's you scared the thing or you attacked the thing, so now it's just defending itself. It's not like oh, I really hate the population of Tokyo. It's just there. Like it's an animal living its life.
Yeah. And it just happens to be a nuclear animal that's the size of a skyscraper. So
yes. And God, that sequence is just like, it's all these like because like, you know, yes, it's a big monster, but if like that happened, like if that was happening like in our city,
like it's so like, heavy, like you're just like, it's all over. It's all over.
Like to everyone there, they think they're probably dead. Like they're like, yeah, we're gonna die. But it's also just like, what is gonna stop this? Like you see it just take everything and be able to just blow up everything. It's like, how are we even gonna like destroy this or save the Earth in this matter, or Japan in this instance? It's like, it's just like, it clearly is just an unstoppable force. And this is, so that sequence plays, and then Godzilla essentially spins up his energy and just like freezes in motion,
powers down. Yeah.
And this is where like I think the debate of the movie falling off is for people. I
Mm.
think there's the people that think this sequence is so like cool that like, oh, they just ran out of money and so Godzilla had to stay frozen for the next 40 minutes of the movie because they, didn't have money and I like this choice because it's the fact that Godzilla is just standing there in the city and could wake up at any moment and just keep going.
Yeah.
So it's this constant like, what's gonna happen? And it's like you're on a timer.
Yeah, it's like the
And
race against the clock. I thought was like super compelling because none of them they don't know what the solution is, and they don't know how much time they actually have to like figure it out. Really.
yeah, and I think this plays into the final act of the movie, which is essentially the governments of the world go, yeah, this can't be stopped, so we're gonna drop a nuke. And that is like the most depressing, horrifying like solution statement.
Yep. And it also to me it felt like it was such a loaded plot point to be like there were all these steps, right? Like, when they deploy the Japanese military, which for the history buffs out there, Japan doesn't actually have a military per se. They have a defense force that can only be utilized if Japan is under a direct aggressive threat from another nation. Like, because after World War II, like the US completely like disarmed Japan and now they can only act essentially if we give them permission to, or if
Yep.
they are directly attacked. So like all of the like, 80 years of politics of like post World War II is like getting wrapped up into this. And the fact that the solution comes down and is decided for Japan in this, that everyone else in the UN has decided the only thing we can do is drop another nuclear bomb on Japan to kill this thing. It was just unreal, and also to me felt very dumb in like a way that made sense. I'm not saying that it was like bad script writing. I'm saying like putting myself in the shoes of someone existing in this situation. Everything you know about Godzilla is that it like grew up off of radioactive waste, is literally a nuclear powered skyscraper dinosaur, and they're like, you know what, even though it eats this stuff, I bet if we drop some more on it, that'll work.
It's totally not just like the best meal of its life it's about to get.
Exactly. It's like now it's like 10 times as big. Like,
well, and that plays into two like plot points here in this final act, which is there's this aspect of your main character throughout the movie has essentially been this person who's like trying to cut through all the bureaucracy and the red tape and all these like rules. And it's just like, we need to respond. We need to come up with a plan that actually can work. And it's not just about like pointing the biggest gun or the biggest bomb at something. And there's this plot point here of like, we can't bomb Japan again. Like, we can't do this. Like, we shouldn't do this. And then, but there's this aspect of like, however, if we agree to do this, we have sympathy from all the other nations to then rebuild. And it's like, that is such a real statement to me, because like, that is how I would see the situation playing out in real life is if Japan allows them to be nuked, they will be able to rebuild with pretty much the entire
world's money.
Yeah. Or if they say, you won't nuke us, we've got it, we will handle it. And if they fail, then they will essentially be a wreck and will just be gone. And it is such a depressing like reality of like, man, the nuke might be the best foot forward for the rebirth of our nation.
It's and it's like we talk about like a rock in a hard place. Like, it's just, I thought they did a really good job of like selling the stakes of that situation.
And I do like that, like, so their plan is essentially we're going to give Godzilla a dental operation and give him some, floss and some Novocaine,
little Novocaine,
and we'll freeze him to death.
But we'll do it in the most insane way ever by blowing up an entire city block on him.
I do like that though, because it is kind of like at this point the city block is gone, so you might as well just use it as your tools, which is kind of a cool thing. I also like that, like, hey, like we're going into like a radioactive zone, and also like we're going into a zone where a giant fucking monster could wake up and just kill us all in a second. So like this aspect of everyone coming together to do this is like this plan could easily just backfire. This plan could
Right.
just absolutely fucking fail. And it's cool that like they're essentially doing this against the clock in the way of like, hey, we're gonna do this, but like the bomb is supposed to drop in like T minus 12 hours. So like, you know, if we fail, you're just gonna drop the bomb right away. Like that's what's happening.
Right.
It's a lot, and I think it's just really ballsy that this movie like was so like just forward about like a lot of its themes, whereas like the past 60 years of Godzilla had been more about monster go smash, whereas
Right.
like because the original Godzilla is a huge commentary about World War II and the nuclear usage in World War II and like that effect. So it's like it's cool to see them go back to those roots in the modern age.
I totally agree. And this is kind of where it was, especially like at the end of this movie, where I really felt a lot of my assumptions as like an American viewer of this movie kind of got turned on their head in a way that I really enjoyed. So, one, I love that like the midpoint, like the real conflict generation of this film is like the military is deployed approximately halfway through the movie, we'll say. And they throw everything they have at Godzilla and it completely fucking fails. They're like,
Yep.
no gun, no bomb that we have can solve our problem. You know, we had 1,000 tanks all shooting Godzilla at the same time. Nothing happened. And the resulting solution to basically stop Godzilla is just very complicated science. Like it completely fell back onto science and invention and ingenuity rather than brute force is just like so not how the film would have gone. They'd have been like, science is for losers and dorks. We're going to blow up this stupid lizard. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
I really like that was a nice flipping, I guess, of what I'm used to, from how like a lot of American cinema ends up handling their monsters. And something that I felt was super, super poignant, like at the end of the film, like they have successfully injected Godzilla with all of his blood freezing Novocaine. A lot of people have fucking died even in spite of that. And it's determined that it's successful and not a single person like cheers. There's no celebration. Everyone just kind of stands very still. And it's just like the main character that says, you all did a very good job. But there's no celebration, no like high-fiving, no like running around like we fucking did it. Yeah. It's just as like haunting as like the atomic breath was for me, because it's like I feel like it actually was like reverent in the fact of knowing that like, hey, we did it, but if only we could have done this faster, if only we could have figured this out sooner. And like the loss that came from all of it still was really interesting to me.
And I love that like Godzilla is essentially just going to remain frozen there forever. Like it's not something they're going to like pick up with a giant crane and drop down. Like the idea is like Godzilla is going to be a monument right there as a reminder. And there's also this element of like he could technically just
come
wake
back
up. Yeah.
Which is a really nice allegory, I guess, to kind of like throwing back to the 1954 Godzilla, because with that being born of a critique directly of, you know, the bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like there are buildings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki that have been turned into museums and monuments, talking about the atomic bombs being dropped, that are literally just like the melted, twisted remains of buildings that were standing when the bombs were dropped. And I feel like having like rebuilding around that and living among it is kind of just like echoed in that, which is like, we have a giant fucking Godzilla frozen in the middle of Tokyo now, and it's just, that's what we're doing.
there he be.
Yep.
And there is actually the final shot is a camera pan onto Godzilla, and it goes to the back and it goes to his tail, and you see these essentially like humanoid like Godzilla creatures on its tail, like frozen in place. And this was, so apparently Godzilla was supposed to have like 10 evolutions in this movie that got scrapped. And one of them was this like humanoid little like creature Godzilla. And
how long was this movie going to be?
I don't know. But like that, so that was like the kind of like the last little reference to it, that scrapped idea. But it does provide a pretty horrifying take that like Godzilla essentially's next like defensive mode was to evolve into another form of species to essentially like spread faster. Because if you just look at it, Godzilla's not doing this out of like anger or spite. So like, oh, you've been feeding me radioactive stuff for 20 years and now I'm angry. It's like, no, it's literally just a creature that just wakes up and just walks through and is defensive when attacked.
Right.
And so if it can just keep evolving to survive, like it's going to evolve in the most like sustainable, like Earth's atmosphere. Like, so like those humanoid creatures to me are like really frightening, because it's like, so Godzilla is essentially about to get killed, but he could have turned into like shedded into all these like creatures. And it's like, what do you do at that point when there's just like
a million of them?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, oh my God, like what?
Yeah, I actually didn't look into kind of like the implications of that ending, but I was just like, that's fucking creepy. It was, and I think that was fine to just be left with that. I was like, what the hell? Like,
yep.
Literally the most disturbing, like final, like split second frame of the movie. You're like, what are those?
Yep. I do enjoy that they're like, hey, in our plan to get him down so we can inject Novocaine in his mouth is like, we're gonna ram 1 billion trains into his legs and bomb the shit out of him.
Yep. The power of public transit, baby, again, could not have happened in America.
Also rip all those like that first wave of dental people, because they just got completely wrecked the second he got up. I also like that his tail can shoot the laser beam as well. It's just neat that they like totally like honored like Godzilla's design but also like evolved it in several ways, in new ways. It's like really refreshing to see.
And also just made him way yuckier, which I thought even though like the effects at some points felt pretty like I was like, yeah, that's composited into this shot. Even in spite of that, I was like, he's gross though, so like I believe it, you know?
Well, and it's just like, I think this is like a good example of like a movie that clearly doesn't have the biggest budget and effects budget, but the like story beats and like what it's representing is so effective enough that doesn't matter as much.
Right.
Because I think for some people, like effects are such a big, like effects look bad, movie's bad. And like, this is one of those cases where it's like, well, if you can fucking like look past it for 2 seconds, there's something bad. Like there's actually something really good there.
Right. And I think they did smart things. And this is kind of where I go back to, you know, there were choices made in how this film was shot that were one part like stylistic and like one part practical. And maybe it's also just like a difference in filmmaking or like how this director chooses to do things. But there were so many static cameras. There weren't like a ton of sweeping dolly shots or like anything like that. And honestly, I think that made the special effects team's lives so much easier.
Yes.
You know, if you don't have to track with a tracking camera, it's a lot easier to just make the effects work when it's in a fixed space. And and it like even though there are some shots of Godzilla that I'm like, I don't know, that hasn't aged super well. There's a lot more that honestly do hold up, and they kind of do the Cloverfield thing where they do a good job of not always showing you everything that's happening. and using that to kind of build more effective suspense and like make Godzilla feel more believable. So I was really, really impressed with this. And yeah, I just looked up its budget, $15 million.
Jesus Christ. I
That's
should look at the
nothing.
budget. Oh my
That
God.
is nothing.
That makes me like this movie anymore that they were able to do that with $15 million. Oh my God.
Right? Like, again, I think 14 million got poured into that one atomic breath sequence.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that they did originally film things with a person in a suit.
And some of those shots are still in. I feel like I could still see the man in the suit in some aspects of it.
Yeah, they definitely I know they were trying to do the suit thing, and then they decided partway through to switch it over to visual effects. So I know that's probably why there are some scenes where you probably could point out like, oh, this is where there's a suit that they probably digitized over a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it works, and it's actually cool to see like the suit still kind of survived because like, you know, like we're in an age of like everything can just be done digitally. So it's cool to see like at one point they were attempting to just be like, we'll put the person in the suit again and run through the little
source perspective and like do all sorts of, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, $15 million. I mean, it's a lot of money to you and me, but that is nothing to a film production. So
yeah,
that's crazy.
It's also interesting because of like how big Godzilla is for like Japan, like as an icon. That like only $15 million. Like, damn.
It's like either that spreads a lot further, or like they were taking a risk on this one, is what it kind of tells me.
And I do know this movie was kind of made in response to the 2014 Godzilla reboot from Legendary Pictures. Because there was kind of like we want to make our Godzilla movie now, but they were like, we want to make like a serious Godzilla movie and
not like a fun Godzilla movie.
Yeah. So I honestly would love, I don't need necessarily a Shin Godzilla 2, but I would love to see another like seriously taken Godzilla movie, like one that has like a lot of like, you know, social commentary with it.
Right.
Because
agree.
I think those are I think it's very effective to see that. So it would be nice to see like another one of these get made in like the next 5 to 10 years, but you never know at this point. Like it probably won't get made, but
yeah, it's like it does make me wonder if they have any plans for another one, because it's like it did really well at the box office, especially for its budget. So it's like, if that's what the movie industry cares about at this point in time, I mean, it's like you've got a winner on your hands. So,
but I also know like it's probably also like the success that like the Godzilla at the forefront of everyone's mind right now is the Legendary Pictures ones.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably like we might as well just like let this series play out and then we'll come back to like a Toho Godzilla later. I kind of assume that's probably how Japan is looking at it.
They're trying to balance it. I mean, it's like the thing is like they're getting paid either way. So, you know, nothing. I guess they're like nothing wrong with licensing it because then we don't have to do anything else.
But yeah, I really like this movie. The reason why I think it might be my favorite Godzilla movie, the only Godzilla movie that rivals it, is the original.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think it's my favorite is just because it's like it has so much commentary about like the state of the Japanese government and like bureaucracy and just all these things, while like it has some pretty profound moments like layered throughout with just Godzilla alone, that I'm like, I was not expecting this movie to hit so like hard at times.
Yeah.
That I think for me it was also like the build up to of like my dad always being like, oh, this movie's not, it was good and then it falls off and like all this stuff, that like my brain was kind of like, oh, this movie's okay, and I kind of built it up as just okay. So when I finally watched it, I'm like, holy shit, this movie's fucking awesome.
This is like probably it's like one of the greatest ones they've done. Like, I'm honestly glad that I didn't go in with like, I had no thoughts or influences one way or the other. I just was like, damn, it's nice that Toho made a new Godzilla movie. I was like, I wonder what they did with it. And
yep. Good
job.
It's it's a good movie. So so you think people should watch this movie?
I think if you have even a remote interest in, I guess, like foreign films, monster films. If you like Godzilla, it's a must watch. If you have any interest in what filmmakers are doing outside of the U.S., it's a must watch.
Yeah.
Really, like, it's crazy. I'm still just like, I'm so shook that this is made on essentially like maybe even less than like an indie film budget in the US. Like,
Yeah.
I am blown away by that.
No, it's definitely one of those things that the second I watched it, I was like, wow, this is like up there on like the if a super special collector's edition ever was running out in the wild and I ran into it, I'd buy it like immediately because it's like I want to have like whatever the fanciest edition is to display because it's like this movie means a significant thing to me now that I'm like I don't want to just have like a crappy Blu-ray. I want to have like a really nice thing to display because I'm like this movie fucking rocks and I want everyone to know if they ever walk into my house that I love this movie.
I love Shin Godzilla, and honestly, I want a copy of the poster for it. Like the promotional poster for it is so sick. Yeah.
This movie has some really good posters for it because like there's some pretty effective posters. Like I like that one of them is literally just like a half cut off of Godzilla and it just says God help us on it and it's just like
that's so shit. Rad.
But yeah, I think we've got to talk about our kaiju boy for a bit here. So it's time for our little letterbox Rotten Tomatoes, guess
Metacritic, guess the score.
Metascore right. Game. Last time you asked me, so this time I get to ask you. I want you to guess what the critic and audience score was for Rotten Tomatoes. This is going to be a hard one because it's that weird foreign release that had a limited theatrical release, so it wasn't seen by many people. So
right, it's like smaller sample size.
The only hint I want to give you is like it was positively received. So it is a positively received movie, but like you just kind of have to guess where did the critics fall and where did the audience fall on it.
And it's going to be, I'm trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to formulate my guess because it's like, what is the cutoff for a positive reception on Rotten Tomatoes? So, okay, remind me, critic score is out of 10, audience score is out of 100, right?
Well, so on Rotten Tomatoes, it works out of 100% for both.
Okay.
So, 0 to 60 or 0 to 59 is considered rotten and 60 to 100 is considered fresh.
Okay.
Audience and critic.
Cool. All right. Well, then I'm going to have to say, I think the critics gave this an 83 and the audience, I'm going to say, gave it a 78.
You were very close on both. I'm actually a little bit. I thought you were gonna maybe shoot too high for audience.
See, it's like I know that it's like with less people seeing it, it means that like stronger variations in opinion are gonna tank it in some ways. Yeah. So
it was 86% for critics. So you're 3% off there.
Okay.
And it was 75% for audience. So you're 3% off there.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good guesses right there.
It's me, the aggregator. Yeah, that's okay. Good for me. I'm patting myself on the back right now. That's a pretty solid guess.
Yeah,
and I'm not surprised by it. I'm not surprised by those scores because it's like I think this thing this movie does a lot of things really, really well. But there are rough edges. There's rough edges for sure.
There are rough edges, and I think the reason why I figured the critic score would be higher than the audience score is because I feel like there's a group of audience members who are like, I wanted a modern monster bash 'em up, and got a kind of a weird political, almost satirical movie, So there's that aspect of like, oh, Godzilla didn't do enough. So there's going to be people like, this movie sucks. And then there are going to be the people who are like, oh, this movie's boring or whatever. So like, I knew there was going to be some mixed reception from like an audience standpoint, but the critics felt like I feel like a good amount of critics were going to be like, oh shit, this is the Godzilla I've been waiting for.
It's like, where has this been all along? It's not dumb.
Yeah. So, that, I think concludes everything we want to talk about. Is there any final thoughts you have?
Watch the movie. I would just say, just go watch the movie. Find a way to consume it. I think you bought it on Funimation, right? You bought it directly from.
I bought a Blu-ray copy that came with the digital copy for Funimation. That's how you were able to watch it.
Cool.
But the movie is available it's actually pretty easy to find. Like, you can rent it for like $3. So it is not a like, oh, you have to go to some foreign website to order it to get a special, like, no, it is not a lost relic. You can find this movie pretty easily. So
perfect. There's no excuses.
Yeah. So I do think it is something where it's like, if you have a night to kill 2 hours and want to think about things for a little bit, watch Shin Godzilla.
Watching Godzilla. Just go get it done. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's all I have to say. So what I want to say to all of you is thanks for tuning in to Aspect Ratio. I'm the Rodgers Academy, and this is Spooky Deer. Thanks for listening, and you have a great night, or great day, or great car
whatever.
ride.
We love you. Take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do.